I'm going to work at either Starbucks or Southwest Airlines because I own a company and I need to be infused with the spirit of customer service so that I can breathe that into my company. He was so set on knowing what he wanted. He made a decision to get around the level of excellence that he was looking for driving into his company so that he could soak it up, experience it, teach it, share it, and then bring it back to his company and deliver it. I was recently informed that 96% of all people watching, that means you, are not actual subscribers to the channel. So take a second and hit subscribe.
Welcome to The Point with Jeff Spikes, the show about achieving goals, embracing growth, and finding your true path. And now, here's your host, Jeff Spikes.
Hello and welcome to The Point. You are a change advocate. You are looking for ways to grow, to improve, to find the best out of life, and you're excited about things in the future. You're interested in your strengths and interested in knowing the best of yourself and not having any hesitation stepping forward into learning and gaining in new awarenesses that help you expand. Today, put yourself in a place of opportunity. There's been some discussion lately about the power of visualization, how the power of visualization fits into the designing process, how it makes it so real, and it's such such an important step of ownership. I want you to put yourself in the position of opportunity and think about when opportunity shows up for you. And in that, I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to tell a story that I think is a really fun story. It's about a 20-year-old story. The story goes on this, that 20 years ago, I had made a major career change, and I decided I wanted to work in a corporation, and I had decided I wanted to work in a corporation that was really intense with customer service. And I had looked at a couple of different companies that employees loved to work in and that clients loved to visit or be a part of. I landed on Starbucks. So Starbucks had made a big splash and had made, had gone over a certain amount of stores, and they were in Arizona at the time where I was, and it was a risk, but I thought, I'm going to go and try and change my career. And I had to take a pretty serious cut to do that. I was coming out of supply chain and distribution, where I was director of supply chain for a bakery that served nationwide. And it was a significant change to go to Starbucks. The only place they'd let me start, because I wanted to work with the customer service experience, was by taking over as a store manager. So I went through a bunch of training and started as a store manager. I moved to another store and did a turnaround, and then I got moved to one more store that needed a turnaround, and we did a similar move. And in 1 year, the store was extremely successful. When I took over this store, it shared a parking lot with a Safeway that had a Starbucks in it, and the Starbucks was busier in the morning than the store I took over. And the main reason was because the partners in the store that was the Starbucks corporate store weren't executing to the standards that Starbucks would as far as speed of service and timeliness and everything else. So Starbucks back then was different than it is today. I'm going to refrain from making any comments or judgments or thoughts over where Starbucks is today versus then. I just know it was different. There were not as many drive-thrus. There were a lot more community stores. And the drive-thrus that were there were extremely busy. And in the region where I was, people were really important. And it was just nurturing people and helping people grow was critical. It was during this time I had been exposed to strengths, and I had a pretty big shift in looking at what I did best, which had part to do with this change. It was but it was also just taking a big risk, right? So I quickly became successful. This was the last store I managed when I moved into regional, and I started working with corporate with many stores. And I was running a store where I was difficult to get staff to understand how special it was to work there. It was a community store that had been there a long time, and people were very proud of the connections they had and the long-standing clients that they were all friends with and everyone had become very close with were all the ones that hung out all morning. And so they weren't attracting the money that just wanted to get in and out and get their morning commute. And it was faster, again, as I said, for customers to go to the Safeway, walk into a Safeway, go to that Starbucks, and get their coffee and leave. I was recently informed that 96% of all people watching, that means you, are not actual subscribers to the channel. So take a second and hit subscribe. And it was faster, again, as I said, for customers to go to the Safeway, walk into a Safeway, go to that Starbucks, and get their coffee and leave. That was one way that we started to turn that right away. But about 3 months into this, we're having what we called open interviews, where from the entire district, different managers would take over the interviews, and we'd help the people that we thought were qualified. And in walks opportunity. I'm going to tell you this opportunity. Imagine opportunity walking in and everyone qualified to hire this opportunity, this person who was a great opportunity, said no. They were like, no, I can't do that. And so think about, we have no clue. You have no idea when opportunity has walked past you or in front of you or even sat right down in front of you and you didn't notice it. But what you do know, what you can know, and that's, by the way, that's no shame. That's there's nothing we can do about that yesterday, and there's nothing we can do about it right now if we just happen to not see something that's later we might look at as opportunity. But what we can do is we can know what we don't want enough to move away from it. And when we notice it and feel it, to lean into it for a lesson if there's still a lesson in it, but really just know well enough what we don't want that we choose different behaviors than what we chose when we experienced something we didn't want. Maybe there's something you don't want that you've never experienced as well, and that keeps other behaviors really anchored. And that as well could be a limitation. But let's just think about this for a second. What we can do is we can really design the future we want. You can think about what you're creating in any segment of life that you're looking for. So in this case, I was creating a store environment where I valued helping the people that work there understand how amazing it was for them to work there at that store and in that region at this company at the time that it was. Because it really was an epic time to be there and involved. It was a high growth time. People were excited. Starbucks had put up a whole lot of these really small stores with tiny footprints, and they were reaching an age where they were really going to need some help soon and some renovation. But it was really important as we got busy that people understood the value of working in a high customer service position. The other thing was I was growing the store and changing the environment of the store, not by putting my foot down and telling everybody they had to follow a rule. One thing to grow anything or try and build something just based on rules, but I was really working on anchoring into the respect that comes with the people that put the hours and the money that was spent paying people and researching really what are the best practices to work in any environment out of respect for other people, wrapping our head around things that didn't always make sense. It always, people said, oh, the training is so difficult. There's no way we're going to check every box and get everything done in this training program. Right about the same time as this opportunity walked in the door, somebody else had started, and that person actually completed an entire training program and had every box checked and every supervisor signed off. Everything that was expected of them was done, and they were accelerating and soaring. Very quickly after that, it became a new standard of belief from everybody that they could actually complete these trainings better, that they could do better than what they thought they did. So shift supervisors and other people training all of a sudden dropped the excuses they were giving people to not complete. They began to expect more from people, and they began getting more from people because somebody showed that it really was possible. There were a couple things they did that made it easier. There were a few ways of looking at it that were different. But wow, what an amazing moment and opportunity that was that really changed the entire district and eventually went further through the region as we started doing, as we started sharing that information in shift supervisor skills classes and other things. Anyway, I digress here into the story, but the overall picture, I want you to think about this. These are the details to think about. What are you about where you're going to go and where you're going to find opportunity when you're trying to make a change. Maybe you own a company and you're trying to make a change and you're hoping for a certain person or a certain vendor or a certain client to come on board. And there's something in the future that you're waiting for that you're really excited about, but certain things would be great if certain things got better or improved if that happened. So just think about that for a minute. Imagine what it is that you're looking forward to and how you can think about it, and then consider these stories, because these are the details to imagine when you sit in the visualization place of thinking about what's going to happen. You don't know, but you can paint the picture as if it were happening, and you can connect to it emotionally and with all of these details, right? So we had started these open interviews, and in walks this man, Rick Burke. Now, Rick Burke owns a company. He owned a company then as well called Rick Burke. Rick Burke is a HVAC technician that I know that became a manager and moved to Oklahoma. Anyway, I apologize about that. Rick Gould. And Rick Gould owns a company called Gould Intelligent. And he helps significant companies turn entire sections of their companies around from, dire straits. And he's helped companies come out of bankruptcy. And Gould Intelligent is more of an IT consulting firm that also does a handful of other things. He's working on some amazing projects with the certification processes that happen for, if you think about a barber or a doctor or a lawyer, all the certifications that need to happen in a government process. But so he does implementations, and his team does all kinds of things. But that's not quite as important as here's what's happening. A business owner of a successful consulting firm walked in and sat down in front of me, a manager of a Starbucks, doing open interviews for a handful of other Starbucks. And I looked at his resume. He's highly overqualified if you think about that. But Starbucks had a great way of hiring people from the community that did all kinds of things. So overqualified, maybe not, right? It was nice to have some real diversity there as far as ways of thinking and everything else. But here's the catch, right? He sat down and he said, I'm going to work at either Starbucks or Southwest Airlines because I own a company and I need to be infused with the spirit of customer service so that I can breathe that into my company and make sure that we are as customer-centric as either Starbucks or Southwest Airlines or both. I was recently informed that 96% of all people watching, that means you, are not actual subscribers to the channel. So take a second and hit subscribe. He was so set on knowing what he wanted, he made a decision to get around the level of excellence that he was looking for driving into his company so that he could soak it up, experience it, teach it, share it, and then bring it back to his company and deliver it. Now, he couldn't work as many hours as many, and that was a little bit of a problem. I know at some point Starbucks made a change where you have to work a certain amount of hours if you want to be an employee there. And I'm telling you, if that were the case with this guy walking in today, it's a miss. A lot of reasons for it that everyone said no. Well, he owns a company. Will he really be dedicated? It's just going to be temporary. We're going to spend all this time to train him, and what happens? Any store manager that hires this individual, Rick, was going to have somebody that really values and appreciates customer eccentricity, customer service. And he's taking time out of his day and taking time away from his business to be in that environment to soak that up. Now, a couple of managers confessed to me later that they were concerned that they wouldn't have the right environment for him because they were more rule-oriented. And they didn't want to be challenged by him all the time. And I asked, well, why didn't you hire him and make him the champion of customer service? He doesn't have to be a shift supervisor for him to be the champion. What about getting creative? There's a lot of other rules that we won't get into, but here's what happened. I met with Rick the other day for lunch. 20 years later, here's something that's going on. He's still telling the story. He still tells every employee he hires the story of what he expects. In IT, people go to work or go to interview with him, and they say, well, I work with my computer to do these things for the, and it's all about the computer. And he stops them. He says, stop. And even the software and the things that you're implementing, none of that's yours. What matters is the client, and he turns people towards what's the client want and what's important to them and what are they looking for. All that matters is that you are connecting with the client, making sure the client has their needs met and that they're enthusiastically satisfied with what product you've delivered, with whatever result it is that you've given them. Back then, the customer is always right and all that. Starbucks' way of saying that was just say yes. And Rick and I were standing at the register one day, and there's a guy who came in all the time that people used to joke about it. I think he used the same cup in his car for a week, but he'd come in on one day, whenever, and he'd get a venti hot coffee. Back then, that was $2 or something. Some people laughed and said, he's grabbing a venti cup out of the garbage on his way in and buying it. He'd always ask for a refill price. And people behind the counter get so bent out of shape and so upset and so angry that he's taking advantage of the situation. He's doing all these things. And Rick said, all right, how are we going to handle this? And he and I were talking about it. And I said, well, let's talk about it, right? And this was a really important thing. It was like, who is our customer in this case? It was clear that the individual coming in wanting a refill price was our customer. And do we want this customer? Of course. In that environment, Starbucks wants this customer because we want the traffic. We want happy people, and we don't know what that's going to come from. Is Starbucks making money? Well, at the time, we considered that, okay, even if they're getting the refill price, he is bringing in a used cup, and how much coffee do we throw away anyway? It's an increase of revenue. We're fine. We can afford to give this guy a cup of coffee. But then who's our real customer? Well, our real customer there, for me as a manager, was my team. A customer of mine is the team and making sure they're happy with what's happening. And Rick said, okay, so how are we going to do this one? We did it interestingly and creatively, but one of the important things that came up was, hey, first of all, why are you getting upset that someone's taking advantage? And are they really? What if they need it that bad? What if it's that important to them? They need it that bad. That's what really makes the difference. Is that any different than the smile you give anyone else? Removing all the judgment and everything else, it's not your money. They're not taking advantage of you. You get paid the same way, either way. So if Starbucks says, and if the manager says, hey, it's okay, let him do it, put a smile on your face and embrace it. Is that okay? This individual did become a better paying customer because everyone stopped looking at him sideways and he could feel the tension. He didn't care, but he could feel the tension. And once that was gone, it was different. And he just had an attitude about a couple of things, but it didn't stop him later as we warmed up to buying other things. And as far as I know, he may still be out there trying to take advantage of that. But that's just one small thing. There's other stories from this that I'll tell at another time. And one of them is touching. And one of them is just the most angry customer you could ever imagine. And they were angry about the coffee that they weren't having made. And it seemed like I was just never in the store when they were there. And everyone was just pulling their hair out. A couple of people almost in tears because this woman would just be so upset. And they just couldn't help her be happy. And we were able to handle that one in a really creative way. So we'll do a session. We'll do one of these on recovery. Client and customer service recovery, because most of the time people aren't upset always about exactly what they're saying they're upset about. There's usually something else underneath it, and learning how to ask those questions and get to what's underneath it is important. But back to Rick here for a minute. Can you imagine doing open interviews and having something like that happen and then thinking through what would you do? What happened was I hired him. And I brought him into the store and I trained him to be a barista. And he wasn't interested in being a shift supervisor because that did require more hours. He was an amazing barista that showed up on time or early every day. He loved being there. He was kind to every single partner that worked there, and anyone struggling with anything, he'd help, especially the idea of saying yes and making a customer's day. He became a champion and helped anyone else that worked with him become a total champion at helping people that came into the store as a customer feel great in that 5 minutes that we got to be of service to them. And we started doing things for teachers and all kinds of things. And we became the busiest store in the area. I was recently informed that 96% of all people watching, that means you, are not actual subscribers to the channel. So take a second and hit subscribe. And we became the busiest store in the area, minus the drive-thrus. And we became busier than the Safeway. But he made such an impact. The person that did the training was impacted, that really excelled in the training because of the level of professionalism that Rick brought to the table. And Rick wasn't getting all of the training done quite the same, but this guy just absolutely nailed it, and that made everyone better. What is the value that we're gaining there, right? The gain here is to consider what gifts are going to walk into your life as you win. What amazing things are you going to attract into your life when you're thinking right? I know, and you've heard me share before about left foot yes. When you're walking, every time your left foot hits the ground, say the word yes. Going into the Veterans Administration in Phoenix, Arizona has historically been a very difficult, challenging thing for many people, and that's been turned and improved greatly. Every time I use the left foot yes going into the VA, it works. I have a wonderful experience. Even when I don't get the exact answer I'm looking for, the people I'm talking to seem more open and willing to work with me. What opportunity is going to come to you when you're in the right place of receiving, where you're really in flow with the universe? It seems like everything's just going your way. I was in the position where I had done enough work where I was ready for people and opportunities to show up where one effort could become 20 results, and in walks this guy. Clearly, you can serve a cup of coffee at any cafe and only serve a cup of coffee. But if in that 5 minutes your job is to help that person feel better about themselves, now we're talking. Any other store would that have worked? Not sure. Don't know. Can't look back. I know of a few it would not have worked, and a few of those managers were absolutely clear with me that they didn't hire him because they were afraid it wouldn't work. So what are the chances that opportunity walked in to the store I was managing with the team I had that was hungry for positivity and for different perspective, totally respected where he was coming from, and made an amazing impact in driving change in the organization that otherwise would have taken a great deal of time. And hiring another guy at the same time that aced the training program, the entire region took a bump over one small thing. It really is just a small thing, hiring a guy part-time to be a barista a couple mornings a week in a Starbucks. But it had a couple hundred, if not more, people coming through for the reason of feeling better about themselves because they did. We were not selling a cup of coffee. We were selling a cup of coffee, literally, right? But that's not the environment we were providing. Think about the stories in your life. Think about the cool things you've done and stand on that for a while. Stand on that list energetically for a while and think about what it was like to be excited before those things happened. And what opportunity is going to be right in front of you that you're going to recognize as an opportunity. Who's your Rick that's going to walk in and do something for you that's going to have you put one effort forward and have 20 or 100 or 1,000 results expand from that one decision and that one thing that you did? What is it? It may not be a person. It might just be a decision. And it might happen when you're walking through the door into a restaurant. You just don't know. It might be a phone call that's coming. But visualize the possibilities of things that can happen as things are coming together, because there is no destination. This is just about the journey. So when you're on the journey, allowing the things that you want to achieve, giving yourself the permission and allowing things to happen that are moving in the right directions towards the things that God's put in your heart, and you're in flow towards those things, what are the experiences, the people, the foods, the restaurants, the birthdays, anything, because that gets it down to a level enough where it becomes very real in your consciousness and your unconsciousness. So again, in your entire being. We're going to tell a few more stories over time, see how in this forum that helps with kind of wrapping our head around this visualization process as we're starting to set goals and really learn to perfect and use the most amazing part of you to walk through life, to affect your kids, your family, your loved ones, your friends, your coworkers. It's amazing to see the possibilities. And the detail is what matters. So peace out, love to all, and make it a beautiful week. Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of The Point with me, Jeff Spikes. Please visit jeffspikes.com for everything you would need to know to engage with me offline. And lastly, thank you for your time, your attention, and your consideration. This is The Point.